Working as a taxi driver comes with few perks, like watching people walk in and out of your life. So much so that all those faces start to look the same. But every now and then, someone leaves you with a question. And sometimes, that question lingers in your mind long after the ride is over. A few years ago, I started working as a taxi driver to stay afloat. My mother had passed away some years back, and my father had followed some years after. I was 25 at the time, with no siblings, so I wasn't exactly helpless, but things went from bad to worse after I lost my job almost overnight. At the time, the only option that seemed available was to work as a taxi driver. I had an old Honda I'd inherited from my dad, so I figured that I might as well use my available resources to make a living. Driving at night paid better, so that's what I did, even if it meant long hours alone. You meet all kinds of people doing that job, especially after midnight. Most encounters blur together after a while, but some stay with you. There were the usual things: passengers who talked too much, others who didn't speak at all, and the occasional uncomfortable silence. I learned quickly how to read people, or at least I thought I had. Some passengers gave off an energy you could understand within seconds. Others were harder to place. That Friday night in October was the first time I realized how wrong those instincts could be. It was just after midnight when I dropped someone off near a small hotel on the edge of town. The streets were unusually quiet, even for that hour, and the air had that stillness that comes before something shifts. Almost immediately, my phone lit up with a new request. The pickup point was only a few minutes away, outside a bowling alley in a half-empty strip mall. It seemed routine enough, so I accepted without thinking twice. When I pulled into the parking lot, the place looked completely shut down. Most of the lights were off, and the few that remained flickered faintly overhead. There were no other cars, no movement, nothing that suggested anyone should be there, except for one person standing under a dim light near the entrance. He didn't move as I approached. He was tall, dressed simply in a grey hoodie and dark jeans, hands tucked into his pockets. His head was slightly lowered, as if he had been staring at the ground for a long time. When my headlights reached him, he slowly lifted his gaze. There was no wave, no sign of recognition, just a quiet acknowledgement. I rolled down my window and asked if he was the rider. He nodded once, almost mechanically, then walked over and got into the back seat behind me. The door closed softly, and for a second the car felt smaller than it had before. I confirmed the destination on the app, an address about 20 minutes away in a residential area I didn't recognize. He answered in a calm, even tone that carried no emotion at all. Something about it felt off, but I brushed it off and started driving. For the first several minutes, he didn't say anything. I checked the rearview mirror occasionally, mostly out of habit. Each time I caught him staring forward, not out the window, not at his phone, just ahead. More specifically, at me. Not directly into my eyes, but at the back of my head. Trying to ease the tension, I asked how his night had been. There was a pause, longer than expected, before he answered. He said he just needed to get away from somewhere. I asked casually where he meant. He replied that it didn't matter, and that was the end of that. The further we drove, the more isolated the area became. Streetlights grew scarce, replaced by long stretches of darkness and tall trees. The houses were spaced far apart, their yards stretching deep into the shadows. It felt like we were leaving the city behind entirely. Even the road seemed quieter, as if sound itself had been muted. About 15 minutes into the drive, he leaned forward slightly. His voice broke the silence in a way that made me tense without realizing it. He asked if I could turn into a driveway just ahead. I followed his direction and saw a house set back from the road, barely visible in the dark. The place looked abandoned. The yard was overgrown, the the exterior worn and neglected. There were no vehicles, no signs that anyone lived there at all. I asked if it was his house, trying to keep my tone neutral. He simply told me to pull in. I hesitated, just for a moment, before turning into the driveway. The tires crunched softly over gravel as I came to a stop near the front. I shifted the car into park and waited, expecting him to get out immediately. But he didn't move. Instead, he kept his gaze fixed on the house. I turned slightly and asked if everything was all right. Without looking at me, he told me to wait. Then he opened the door and stepped out in the dark. He didn't head for the front entrance. Instead, he walked around the side of the house and disappeared from view. For a while, I just sat there, engine running, unsure what to do. The ride was still active, and technically I was supposed to wait. But something about the situation felt wrong, in a way I couldn't explain. It wasn't just the house, it was the silence, the stillness, the absence of anything normal. My instincts were starting to kick in. After a couple of minutes, I decided to end the trip manually. I marked it as complete and prepared to leave. As I shifted into reverse, movement caught my eye. He was coming back, and he was moving quickly. He reached the car faster than I expected and opened the rear door without hesitation. Sliding back into his seat, he spoke immediately. He told me to take him somewhere else. I asked him to update the destination in the app. He didn't respond. I repeated myself, trying to stay calm. Again, I received no answer, just silence and that same steady gaze in the mirror. After a few seconds, he changed his request. He told me to drive him back to where I had picked him up. Not wanting to escalate things, I agreed and started driving. The return trip felt longer than the first. The air inside the car had shifted, heavy in a way that made it hard to relax. He didn't speak, but I could sense him now more than ever. I could feel him watching me without needing to look. Even the sound of the road seemed distant. At one point, I tried to break the tension with a simple comment. I mentioned it must have been a long night. He replied quietly that it wasn't over yet. Something about the way he said it made me regret asking. After that, I stayed silent. When we reached the strip mall, I pulled into the same spot where I had found him. The parking lot looked just as empty as before, untouched by time. I was about to end the ride when he leaned forward again. His voice was calm, almost thoughtful. He asked if I ever thought about how much time any of us really had. For a moment, I didn't know how to respond. I forced a small laugh and said it wasn't something I focused on. He didn't react to that at all. Instead, he leaned back and said he thought about it often. The words hung in the air long after he finished speaking. Then, without another word, he opened the door. He stepped out slowly but didn't close it right away. For a second he stood there, half in the car, half outside. Then he looked directly at me for the first time and said, "I picked the wrong path tonight. Some roads aren't meant to be traveled twice." The door shut, and he walked away in the dark. I sat there, unable to move for several seconds. My hands were still on the wheel, but I didn't remember gripping it that tightly. Eventually, I drove off, checking my mirrors more than necessary. The feeling didn't leave, even when I got home. Later, I opened the app to review the trip. Something was off immediately. The rider's name was gone. No profile picture, no history, no record that the trip had ever existed. It was as if it had been erased completely. I contacted support, hoping for some kind of explanation. They told me the data wasn't available, possibly due to a system error. But their explanation didn't match what I knew had happened. I had completed that ride. I remembered every detail too clearly for it to be nothing. I never saw him again. But sometimes, when I'm driving late at night and the streets are quiet, I think about that question. About the way he said it so calmly, like it wasn't hypothetical at all. And every now and then, when a new request comes in from an empty place, I hesitate. Because I can't help but wonder, what would have happened if I had said yes to his demands? I dropped her off and watched her walk all the way to the door. So, explain this. Why was she still sitting in my back seat 4 minutes later? This happened in 2021, when I was driving full-time for Uber. My name is Rodriguez, and at that point, night shifts had become routine. The city I worked in stayed busy late, especially on weekends. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid consistently if you stuck with it. Most nights blurred together after a while. You develop a rhythm doing that kind of work. Pick up, drive, drop off, repeat. Some passengers talk too much, others not at all. You stop overthinking things and just focus on getting people where they need to go. At least that's how it usually goes. That night started like any other. It was around 1:30 in the morning when I got the request. I had just finished a noisy ride and was hoping for something quieter. The name on the trip was Chris. The pickup point was a short drive away. The location itself was a little strange. It pointed to a narrow side street behind an old strip mall. Not somewhere you'd expect someone to be waiting that late. Still, GPS errors happen all the time, so I didn't question it. I followed the route and pulled in. The area was dim, with only a few weak lights overhead. Most of the storefronts were dark, long closed for the night. Near the corner, I saw a woman standing alone. She wore a hoodie and jeans, her posture still, almost too still. She looked up the moment my headlights reached her. I rolled down the window and said the name. She nodded and walked over without hesitation. There was something deliberate about the way she moved. She got into the back seat and shut the door quietly. I confirmed the destination and started the trip. It was across town, about 25 minutes away. She didn't respond when I asked if everything looked correct. Some passengers prefer silence, so I didn't push it. I just focused on driving. For the first few minutes, the car was completely quiet. Then I noticed her phone in the rearview mirror. It was on, resting in her lap, screen facing up. But she wasn't using it. I glanced again a little later. Same position, same stillness. No scrolling, no typing, nothing. It was like the phone was just there for the light. Something about it felt off, but I ignored it. The drive took us further from the city. Streetlights became less frequent, the roads darker. The houses grew more spaced out, surrounded by trees. It was one of those neighborhoods that felt quiet even during the day. At night, it felt completely cut off. About halfway through, she finally spoke. Her voice was low, almost careful. She asked how long I'd been driving that night. I answered and asked if she lived in the area. There was a pause before she replied. She said she used to. Nothing else. Just that one sentence, like it explained everything. The way she said it didn't invite more questions. So I didn't ask any. We reached the neighborhood a few minutes later. I followed the GPS down a series of narrow streets. Eventually, it led us to a house set back from the road. There were no lights on anywhere. Not on the porch, not inside. I slowed the car and stopped at the end of the driveway. The place looked empty, but not abandoned. Just still. I asked if this was the right location. She didn't answer right away. I turned slightly and repeated the question. After a moment, she nodded. No smile, no acknowledgement beyond that. I put the car in park and told her to have a good night. She didn't move. A few seconds passed. Then 10. Then closer to a full minute. I asked if everything was all right. That's when she finally reached for the door. She stepped out slowly but didn't close it. Instead, she stood there, facing the house. Completely still, like she was waiting for something. Or someone. I stayed quiet, unsure if I should say anything. After about 30 seconds, she turned back toward me. Her expression hadn't changed at all. Then she said, "I need to go back." The lady suddenly became very distressed, her voice rising in a shaky, urgent plea. She asked me to drop her off right there. I tried reasoning with her. We were in the middle of an almost dead neighborhood. It would take long before she could get another ride in this same area. I explained she'd need to request another ride through the app or wait till I had dropped her off on a slightly more active street. She didn't respond right away, just stood there, holding the door open. Then she said, more quietly this time, "Please." There was something different in her voice now. Not emotional, just urgent. I repeated that I couldn't do it without a new request. That's when she said something that made me pause. "They're still inside," she said. I asked who she meant. She didn't answer. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then she slowly stepped back and closed the door. Without another word, she turned and walked toward a house. She didn't knock. She didn't try the handle. She just stood on the porch. I waited a few seconds longer before pulling away. Something about staying there felt wrong. So I left. I drove a few blocks and stopped at a 24-hour gas station. I needed a break, something to reset my head. I parked under the lights and went inside. Grabbed a drink, used the restroom, nothing unusual. When I came back out, everything looked normal. My car was where I left it. The lot was quiet. Nothing out of place. Until I opened the driver's door, she was sitting in the back seat. Same hoodie, same posture, looking straight ahead like she had never left. For a second, I genuinely thought I was mistaken, like I had walked up to the wrong car. I froze, halfway in the driver's seat. My first thought was that I forgot to lock the doors, but I was sure I had. I always double-checked, especially at night. I got in slowly, keeping my eyes on the mirror. She didn't explain, didn't move, just sat there like before, like nothing had changed. I asked how she got back in. She didn't answer. After a few seconds, she said, "Take me to my specified destination." She said this in the same calm tone as earlier, like we had never stopped the ride. I told her I couldn't do that I was ending the trip, that she needed to request another ride. She didn't argue. She just kept staring forward. Something about the situation felt wrong in a way I couldn't explain. I stepped out of the car again and walked around to the back door, opened it, and asked her to step out. She stepped onto the pavement and stood there. Then she looked past me toward the road, like she was waiting again. I got back into the car immediately, locked the doors this time, and drove off without looking back. I didn't stop again until I was back in a busy part of the city. Even then, I kept checking the mirror. Later that night, I reviewed the trip. I reported it the next day, just to be safe. Nothing explained what I experienced. Nothing made it make sense. I never saw her again. But sometimes, late at night, I think about that moment where I had opened the door and seen her sitting there, exactly where she had been before. And every now and then, when I check my back seat just out of habit, I half expect to see someone there who was already dropped off a long time ago. I followed every safety rule. Nothing was supposed to go wrong. So why can't I explain everything that happened after? This happened in 2020, when I had just moved into my own apartment. My name is Daniel, and I was living alone at the time with my dog. The place was about 8 miles outside the main part of town. Quiet, isolated, and honestly a little too still at night. But at the time, I didn't think much of it. Getting food delivered out there could be hit or miss. Sometimes drivers cancelled, sometimes it took forever. Still, it was easier than driving out late at night. So, I used delivery apps pretty often without any issues, at least not until that Friday. I had spent most of the evening cleaning. A friend of mine was supposed to come over the next day. I wanted the place looking decent before they arrived. By the time I finished, it was already past 6 p.m., and I was too tired to cook anything. So, I ordered food. I made sure my delivery instructions were set to contactless, just the way I liked it. Leave it at the door, no interaction needed. It felt like the safest option living alone. A few minutes later, I got the notification. The driver was on the way in a white hatchback. Everything seemed normal, nothing unusual about it. I went back to the living room and turned on the TV, just waiting for the delivered alert. When it came through, I got up immediately. I was hungry and didn't want the food getting cold, but when I opened the door, there was nothing there. No bag, no receipt, nothing at all, just an empty hallway. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Maybe they'd dropped it at the wrong door. I checked both sides of the hallway quickly. Still nothing. That's when I went back inside to message the driver. Before I could, there was a knock. Not loud, just firm enough to get my attention. When I opened the door again, my neighbor was standing there. He was holding my food. And he didn't look relaxed. He told me he had taken it from the driver. Said the driver was lingering near the building, appearing lost or searching for something, but his focus seemed fixed on the glass rather than the door, lingering around the building instead of leaving the order and walking away. He said it didn't sit right with him. So he stepped in and grabbed the bag. I thanked him, a little confused, but mostly relieved. At the time, I told myself it was probably nothing. Maybe the driver was just checking the address. That's what I wanted to believe. I went back inside and ate, turned on a movie, tried to relax. Eventually, I started getting ready for bed. Locked the doors, checked the windows, everything routine. Nothing felt wrong anymore. That changed sometime during the night. I woke up to my dog growling. He's small, not the kind you expect to act aggressive. So, hearing that caught me off guard. I sat up and listened. The apartment was quiet otherwise. After a minute, he stopped, so I assumed it was nothing, and laid back down. About 15 minutes later, it happened again. Not just a growl, but a mix of barking and whining, like he didn't know whether to be defensive or afraid. That got my attention. Then came a sharp knock against the window. I didn't move at first, just stayed in bed, listening. My dog was fully alert now, pacing and barking. That was enough for me to reach for my phone. I called the police quietly, trying to keep my voice steady. I explained that someone was outside my window, and that something didn't feel right. They told me to move to another room if I could, wait for officers to arrive. It sounded simple, but it didn't feel that way. I moved into the kitchen, trying not to make noise in the dark. From there, I had a view towards the street, and that's when I saw a white hatchback, parked across the open field near my apartment. No lights on, no one visible inside, but I recognized it immediately. It was the same car from earlier, the delivery driver. That realization hit hard. If the car was there, then he wasn't inside it. He had to be somewhere nearby. I stayed where I was, barely breathing, waiting for the sound of sirens, waiting for anything that meant I wasn't alone anymore. The following morning, I found signs outside that someone had been close to the building during the night, but no sign of the person who made them. That part didn't make sense. I stayed inside until my elder brother came around. He decided to stay for a few nights to put me at ease. Around 2 a.m., we both woke up again, this time to banging on the front door. Then I heard a voice outside. It sounded like my neighbors were talking to someone, and then I heard running. I checked through the peephole carefully. It was one of my neighbors. Only then did I open the door. She explained that she'd seen the intruder and alerted her husband. He'd called out trying to confirm if he was a neighbor, but he took off running. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. Just sat there, replaying everything. But the part that stuck with me most was that if my neighbor hadn't seen him, if my brother wasn't around, what would have happened that night? If that story made you pause for a second, you're going to want more. Subscribe to Deep Horror, where we drop new stories that change your definition of scary.